Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. If there were more Lilliam Barrios-Paolis working for the public good, we'd have a lot less to be concerned about. Rightfully, everyone relies on her knowledge and skill. And that's why Mayor Bloomberg asked for her help and appointed her recently to be the commissioner of the Department for Aging. Is it for the aging or for aging?
For the aging.
The aging. So what does it mean to be aged or aging?
Well, it's an interesting term. I think it's changed over the years. I think now, 60 is the new 40?
Yes, that's what they say.
I think, when I think of my grandmother at my age, my grandmother had been old, I think, since she was 45. And I certainly, I'm 63 and I really don't feel that way. So I think it's a relative term nowadays. I think that people don't begin to think about themselves as being old until they're in their 70s, maybe.
Even in the 70s, they can't believe it. Believe me.
No, it's true. It's true. I think that, it's funny because when you talk about senior centers, you see people who are in their late 70s who will say to you, I'm not old enough to go there.
Right, that's true.
So it's true.
So there isn't a cutout, there is, but you do have some ages where people become eligible for different things.
Yes, so for senior employment, it's about 55. And that's because, in the workforce, you become older earlier than in other things.
It's a major problem.
It is a major problem.
Especially in times like this when people get laid off or they don't want to pay benefits and stuff.
Yes,
you can't find another job.
Right, because if you lose your job in your late 50s or somewhere in your 50s, you're not eligible for Social Security until 66 at this point.
And Medicare.
And Medicare, so there's a big gap there, and so that's a real problem.
So does that come into your office jurisdiction?
Yes, we have.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and we do senior employment. Essentially what we do is retrain or train people to join the workforce, some of them for the first time. Some of them are people whose spouse died, they're now 60, and they really are not receiving any income that's, or they need to supplement the income, and they're back, and they're in the labor force for the first time. So it's
that's very difficult.
Very difficult. So we train people, we place them in so-called internships, if you will. The one thing I will tell you is that there's a wonderful work ethic at that point. People are in the workforce because they need to be in the workforce. So they're very giving, and usually we're pretty successful in getting them jobs.
What kind of jobs do they get?
Usually we try to place them in not-for-profits or in other government agencies, some clerical jobs, receptionists, support staff in general. They love to be placed in senior centers because they love to work with seniors. So a lot of them become, social workers. They're active in social services, I should say. So it's a good thing because a lot of them are very giving, and they want to do that. And that applies to males and females. I mean, I have a lot of them in the department itself, and everybody loves them because they're good workers.
So we talked about centers. How many centers are there in the city?
Well,
now, let's say were before the budget.
Right. There were 300 centers, and there's going to be about 250 centers, 253 centers approximately after beginning the new fiscal year. And it's a very painful process. The council today, when they vote, will restore some of those centers. So it remains to be seen what the final number is going to be. But, it's difficult. Yeah. And that to say that, there's not that we need to have one center in every 3 blocks, but for the elderly, it's difficult to go around sometimes, especially if, the crowd that goes to many senior centers is over 80. Yeah. And so for them, proximity is important.
And now with the buses lengthening the distance between bus stops, that's also going to be harder.
That's right.
Before we get there, though, how many people in the city are what we call seniors or something?
Oh, there's about 1 million people who are over the age of 60 in the city.
And
it's growing.
It's growing.
It's growing. And the statistics tell us that by the year, I think it's 2020, there will be more elderly people than children in school age.
So then what do we do?
So, well, that's why it's so important to become age-friendly as a city.
Yeah.
And, it's not just age-friendly, it's universally friendly, because what's an obstacle to a senior is an obstacle to a mom with a baby carriage.
Well, it's normally, a city is, it seems to me, the best place for a senior to be.
Yes.
And as I get older, and I've always lived in the city, I really want to move out. I want to see some green and trees, and I keep saying to myself, it's just reverse. You should have done it when you were younger.
Yeah,
you just should live here.
You should, because it's easier, no matter what it is. Yeah. It's easier to get around. you can, in New York City, you can get a meal at any time of the day. You can, as a friend of mine used to say, you can buy cilantro almost in every corner.
That's
There are
true, yeah.
things that you can get in New York that are accessible. The cultural life in New York, the shopping ability in New York, the
Always
fact.
see people,
Yes.
talk
Yes.
to people.
And,
yeah.
and by and large, no matter, I think New Yorkers get a bad rap about being aloof and so on. I think many more people in New York are very caring than not. And, we have, I think you've heard about the naturally occurring retirement communities, people aging in place.
Known as Norks.
the
and,
Norks.
And that's a group of people who moved into an apartment house, generally, when they were younger.
Right.
And the family, they've stayed. Right. And as they age, it becomes a naturally occurring retirement.
Right. They all went
We
there.
had some of the first ones, I think, on the West Side.
Yes, and what we've seen now is that aside from the Norks, there's aging in place communities, and these are people who voluntarily have created a Nork in their own building, and they don't get any city funding, but they do an array of activities and support each other. There's a new concept of time banking in which people sort of deposit time that they have available to do things for others, and then they can withdraw when they need services from other people. So there's
That's a
any
copy
number.
of younger people with children.
Yes.
And babysitting.
Yes, and so there's an array of things that happen in the city just because of the proximity that we live, with each other, that cannot happen in suburbia, cannot happen in rural areas.
Right. No, it is. It's a great advantage, and the more you talk about it, the more exciting it gets when you think about it. Yeah. So the budget is now. We're in trouble with the budget. It's not a good year. The revenues weren't as high as we'd like them to be to match the expenses. So the cuts go across all agencies, right?
Yes.
And how much do you think those cuts retard the degree of advancement? I mean, if you're developing new programs and new things, I especially think in the schools, of course, with teachers and that kind of stuff. But in your department, what's happening?
Well, we had great ambitions for sort of rethinking and revamping the senior centers and make them centers that not only offered a meal to the seniors, but had more cultural activities, had a lot of health and wellness activities. I think that as seniors live longer, the goal is to make them live healthier and longer. So that exercise is very important. Chronic disease management is very important. Keeping the mind alert is very important. And so with fewer funds, you can do much less. Yeah. And that's the reality. Although I must say that because we do have a great partnership with the City Council, we did not fare as badly as we could have fared had they not been there to support the department. And, from the preliminary things that I see in the budget, we're doing okay.
That's good.
Nobody's doing great, but we're doing okay.
And if some center is closed, it's closed because it's a smaller center?
Yes.
And it's near some other center?
Yes. The centers that we plan to close are centers that serve fewer than 30 meals every day. That means that a very small number of seniors attended, or centers that were part-time. Now, that being said, 30 people are 30 people, and those people loved the center, felt comfortable there, wanted to go there. So I don't want to be glib about it and say, but the reality is that when you have to close, you try to do the least damage that you can. Yeah. And those are the ones.
Which borough has the highest population of older people?
Brooklyn. Brooklyn has the highest population, followed by Queens, and then Manhattan, then the Bronx, and then Staten Island. Yes. Yeah. The Bronx has many times the distinction of having the poorest seniors. But in sheer numbers, Brooklyn has the highest number of seniors.
And how many people have moved here from other countries?
Well, that's a really interesting thing. We have a very large percentage of seniors who are immigrants. And seniors who not only sort of came young and aged, but seniors who came old because they were following their children. So we have an incredible diversity. I mean, we have seniors of almost every ethnicity you can think of. And we now have senior centers that are majority Korean, majority Hindu, majority, all kind of ethnicities from Europe. It's a very interesting place. All kinds of languages are spoken, and also the dietary things that people prefer. Yeah. So we have even when the home delivered meals, we have to be really sensitive to all kinds of different, not just dietary things in terms of low sugar, low sodium, and all that.
But where you come from,
absolutely.
What you like, what's your favorite food?
We have kosher, non-kosher. We have Chinese food. We have Armenian food. We have Polish food.
That's so great. Yeah. So, now, who provides the food?
The food is provided by contractors, so they're not-for-profits by and large that provide the food for the seniors. Some of them cook, some of them cater it by commercial caterers. So there's several commercial caterers that sort of have been with us for many, many years, and they provide
Is that
the
up to
meals.
is that up to the decision by the local senior center, or do you do that centrally?
We do that centrally. So the senior centers cook their own food or cater, and that's their decision. The home delivered meals is central, and we have we have 11 main contracts throughout the city, and they pick up the meal prepared either by themselves or somebody else and then deliver it to the seniors. So, we serve about 28,000 seniors every day in senior centers, and we serve about 17,000 home delivered meals every day.
What I've noticed in our neighborhood is that they have fixed menus. So every Monday they have this, Tuesday, and that they rotate.
Yes.
That some of the seniors know the whole schedule, and if they like chicken better, they'll go.
Seniors follow chicken, so says the lore. For some reason, chicken is sort of like the preferred food.
Isn't that funny?
And they all like to follow that.
Yeah. Have you ever had any undocumented people?
I am sure we have plenty.
But
of
you
them.
haven't had an episode with
No,
knowing.
we don't ask for any proof of citizenship to go to senior centers, and clearly we know that there are many seniors that are undocumented and that go to senior centers, and for them it may be their only meal, could be their only meal. They're not eligible for Social Security. They're not eligible for medical care. Their source of income is usually the kindness of their children or friends or people in the community. So these services are really important.
What's
for
the
them.
average age of people going for lunch into the centers?
In their 70s, usually 73, I think is the main age. But it's there's a lot of. I cannot tell you the number of centers I've been to that have several people who are in their hundreds and in late 90s.
How many people? Do you know how many people we have that are 100 years old or over?
Oh, I'd venture there's over 200. I mean, I know that in home care and in homebound, there's a lot of them. In terms of senior centers, there's a center in Chinatown that every time I've gone to visit, there's at least 10, 12
Really?
Chinese seniors who are in their hundreds, 102, 106. They look better than I do.
Oh no, that's
They're really remarkable.
right.
They're really
and
remarkable.
the economics of the senior population?
Well, it's a third of all the seniors in New York City are poor, and I mean really poor. It's a population that doesn't quite make the necessary amount of money to live independently without any kind of support.
And in that category, are there people who do get Social Security and other people who don't? Do you know that figure about percentage?
I don't know the percentage breakdown, but by and large, there's a very large number of seniors on SSI. That means they didn't have the quotas for Social Security, and that's SSI is a very small check that you get every month. There is there's also a big difference in the gender of the people. Most of the poor people are women, and a lot of them are living alone. And a lot of them have not always lived alone, but their spouse died and they're by themselves. New York has a very large number of people who are by themselves and live alone. And if they had children, the children are not in the immediate vicinity. So there's a lot of elderly who are pretty much on their own. And that makes it very difficult. I mean, it's difficult because as the health deteriorates, there's not always a support system. And that's what we offer a service called case management to provide for that. Sometimes we get calls from kids from all over the country. And outside of the United States. My mom lives in such and such a street and she needs help. So we try to be there for them.
Do you have any idea how many facilities there are for housing seniors?
202s in the city. I don't know the absolute number.
That's
but
federally subsidized
federally
housing.
subsidized, and there's not enough, by and large. We also have a benefit called SCREE, which meets the difference between the seniors pay a third of their income towards rent. It's almost like Section 8, but for the seniors. And there's a lot of seniors who use it, and there's many more who probably should be using it and had not accessed it. We have, the uptake is like 40%, and so there's many more who could be eligible.
It becomes overwhelming, doesn't it? I mean, when you think about being older, now that I'm older, but I have a lot of family, that worries about me, but to be alone
Oh.
with it must be very hard.
We find cases where, you know, the doorman has become the caregiver,
absolutely.
so that they're signing the checks for the seniors, which can lead them.
Yeah,
You know,
to
many people
problems.
are wonderful and kind. Many people take advantage of seniors.
Yeah.
I mean, financial elder abuse is not uncommon, unfortunately, but you know, they're preyed upon. You know, people, they're looking for kindness, they're looking for companionship, and people take advantage of it.
And they need some special understanding
Absolutely.
often, because
Absolutely.
you lose your temper a little easily, or
You forget, you repeat
demand.
yourself.
Yeah, right. My husband rides the bus a lot now to go swimming, and he's always coming home with the stories of, you know, he thinks it's only old people riding the bus. Anyhow.
There's a lot of them, maybe because they're more accessible for the elderly, but also it takes longer than the subway. So
Yeah. And you don't have the steps.
Right.
You're saying it takes longer than the subway, so they have company?
well, I think they have more time in their hands. Actually,
Oh, I see.
They don't have to get to work at a certain point, right?
The Department for Aging, the mayor's office, and the Academy of Medicine, the New York Academy, announced a whole big plan, right, to make the cities
Yes.
livable for older
Yes.
people.
Actually, the city council was also
City
a partner.
council, sorry.
And essentially, yes, the World Health Organization issued if you will, a challenge to the world that in order to make cities age-friendly. And the reason for that is that every country in the world is aging quite, fast, particularly Europe. Europe has become a very old continent. And the United States is not far, and what is happening now is that also third world countries are becoming much older. I think I heard a statistic yesterday that was astounding. I think something like 30 or 40 years ago, only 14 million Chinese were over 70. And now there's like 400 million Chinese over 70. So the proportions are huge. And aging in the third world is very different than aging in a first world country. But the challenges are similar. The challenges around health, the challenges around stimulation, the challenge around family. Unfortunately, people think of the elderly in terms of what they're taking from us, not what they're giving to us. And I think we have to change that mindset. So age-friendly is essentially the attempt to look at every aspect of the city and say, well, how can we be more user-friendly? So, for example, I live on Riverside Drive, between Riverside and Broadway, so where the shopping can happen. There's 2 very long blocks, and there's no place to sit or rest. So can we provide some place where people can, when they're coming back home with big bags, can they rest someplace? That's one thing. Can we make, bicycle lanes are great for the bicyclists, but for the seniors it can become a challenge. So how do we make that better so it's not a problem for seniors crossing the streets? There was a traffic watch that created by ARP in which groups of seniors were sort of on the watch to see which intersections were more difficult and how could we modify them. The whole attempt by the Department of Transportation to put islands in the more trafficked large avenues so people could stop in the middle and not, really have a problem with
crossing.
You're right. You can't race all the time in Houston, Delancey, those streets. The idea that you need places to sit. So Broadway now is a mall and you can sit in places, but it's happening all over the city. The idea that, large print in some of the names of the street and signage that's out there. Not everybody can read the tiny, tiny print. Issues around vision and hearing that you have to be sensitive to. Transportation. How do we make transportation more user-friendly? There are not enough escalators and elevators in the subway. We have the buses that kneel, but are the routes user-friendly for seniors? We're talking in terms of having many more senior days in the theater and in cultural activities. All kinds of things.
Enriching the centers.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, much more awareness around healthcare, around diet, around things you should be eating, things you shouldn't be eating. Awareness around financial empowerment. We're trying to do a lot about a program called Bill Pay, so that you don't have to depend on your doorman to help you sign checks. But there's a bona fide somebody who's been vetted that will come to your home and help you pay your bills. So you are not threatening. You're not having problems with companies threatening you with suits or eviction because you forgot.
So how far are you on this program?
So, there are initiatives that are much more further along than others. I was mentioning to you before the school buses that take seniors shopping, which is a big activity and seniors love it.
Explain it. There's school buses that after they take the kids to school, they have nothing to do.
Right, and you know, they get paid. That's part of the contract. And so we were able to negotiate that they would come to senior centers and pick up seniors. We make appointments for them. And we started taking them to shopping, because many of them in their neighborhoods didn't have like big supermarkets. So we were taking them to Fairway and other places. But then seniors got very enterprising and decided that, hey, we can go shopping to malls, we can go to other places. So they can be doing outings, you know. Other things that we were doing is trying to create senior walking clubs and walk-friendly parks, so that there's some guidance in parks in terms of mileage that you can walk, or you know, and be comfortable in. Just around safety. In Greenwich Village, they began to do. You know, the local bid got together and had merchants give special discounts for people that live there. And are senior friendly, you know, so they would give special perks for the seniors, you know, so all kinds of things like that I think would make New York a much happier place for seniors.
So if you wanted to volunteer to help with this, what do you do?
Okay, so there, actually yesterday they announced a big volunteer initiative. I think all city agencies are taking volunteers, and I think 311 has a special central repository for that. You can get through all of these things if you go to www.nyc.gov, and if you go 311, you can access all of that.
That's most likely the best way to do it.
Yes, yes.
Right. What about, I mean, something like telephone service is so complicated. Do you help seniors? Does the telephone, is there a telephone company? I don't.
We help seniors navigate all kinds of things, from electric bills to water bills to landlords that are not being helpful to, you know, telephones. But, you know, there's also a service called telephone reassurance, and this is for seniors who are isolated. All kinds of other people, including seniors themselves, sign up for calling them, you know, every day or every other day, just to talk. You know, when you're isolated or you're a certain age, it's great to get a phone call. And, you know, my staff always kids that if a senior calls, they can't get off the phone for about an hour. But, you know, it's that human contact that is needed. We're also trying to do more through, you know, by helping seniors become computer literate. And for some of them, I mean, there's Microsoft gave us a small grant to do a virtual senior center, and I was talking to some of the seniors, and one was 93 and one was 89, and the whole world has become available to them, and they now can use Skype to talk to their children in California. And Milton was telling me how he now orders from Fresh Direct, and they've discovered people they hadn't seen in 60 years. You know,
so there's no way, though, that they can get a computer, help with buying a computer?
You know, we're trying to explore that, because for seniors who are homebound,
such an incredible tool.
It
Unbelievable.
It opens a whole world.
I look at houses in Italy all the time.
There you go.
Now, the seniors are a very strong political constituency.
Yes, they are. They tend to be much more civic-minded than the young people, and they vote.
Yeah. So is it balanced out? You know, I don't think the young people have the same advocacy ability that the seniors do.
Well, you know, seniors, I think, have been traditionally much better organized than the younger people. They also feel they have more at stake. And so I think that they're much more willing to you know, be active in political causes. I think that we have to explore even more.
And they also vote.
They
so
vote.
Public officials are going to pay attention to them.
Absolutely. And senior centers are known political stops.
Yeah.
You know,
oh, yes,
so,
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the issues around the closing of senior centers was that, you know, how could I go back there if I've closed it, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, seniors have tremendous political power, and I think civic engagement has become more and more a topic in terms of how do we take, you know, this group and really make them, you know, move things along.
Were they strong for the health bill, the health legislation?
I think,
or were they mixed?
You know, they were mixed because I think there were a lot of scare tactics that were used that scared the seniors. I think in the end they realized that, you know, the idea of the donut. I mean, you know, there are a lot of seniors. The two biggest expenses in New York City for seniors are out-of-pocket medical services, including prescriptions, and rent, because rent is very high, and those people who rent. So those are the two things that impoverish seniors the most. And it's very serious.
Yeah, it's a terrible. We were talking also about when health, the whole question of palliative care. What does happen now?
The so-called death panels.
Yes, the death panels.
Which is, you know, it's such a misnomer and such a rhetorical abuse of reality. Essentially, palliative care is a way to manage your chronic conditions. It does not relate only to end-of-life questions, but it could. The idea is that if you have a chronic disease, it's not going to get cured. Diabetes, arthritis, heart, but you can learn to manage it in such a way that your quality of life is not compromised. So you learn to manage your disease. And palliative care helps you learn how to manage it and avoid unnecessary pain, avoid unnecessary discomfort. There's also the question of how do you want, I was talking to some people at Mount Sinai. They have a big palliative care practice, and they said Americans are the only people that think that death is optional. So we don't like to talk about it.
I know, I've been thinking about that a lot. Yes,
maybe,
it's true.
maybe we
is.
avoid it, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is that, when the end does come, and I saw that with my mother, my sister and I refused to have that conversation. So when the end comes, you don't really know what that person wanted.
Yeah.
And so you're forced to make decisions, and which gives you a tremendous amount of guilt.
Yeah.
That could have been avoided had you had an honest conversation with your doctor, your relative, all together. We tend to treat beyond the point of that makes any sense. Just because we, as families, and doctors as doctors don't know when to stop and say, okay, it is. And so when that moment comes, if you have the facts, and it's education for us and for the medical establishment, then what do you want done? Do you want chemotherapy to the last moment, or do you want something else? Do you want to be on a respirator? Do you, all of those kinds of things. Those are decisions you make when you're healthy.
Yeah.
Not when you're really
So
ill.
I hate to interrupt you, but we are at the end of our time, and I don't like to end on this, but it's a very positive thing because people are discussing it more and more.
It is, and it's really an empowerment.
Yeah.
You decide
in
what
control.
you want. Absolutely, and that's the beauty of it.
Thank you. So thank you, Lilliam Barrios-Paoli, and the aging population is very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.